Um, so, Congressman John Mannion, welcome. You're in Washington. You won the election, and you've been jumped right into a quite a fiery situation in Washington. It seems. Let's just start talking about the issue with what the president has said about Gaza and the United States being the one that's going to essentially take over Gaza. How is that being received by you and your thoughts, and what's your opinion?
Yeah. Well, I want to start here. First of all, I think everyone is happy to see that we are in a peaceful situation at this time, and that hostages have been released, and that we hopefully can get to a place where you know people can work and live in harmony. But again, maybe this is just a distraction by the president, like we've seen a bombardment of those over the past several days. I've always supported a two-state solution, and I continue to support a two-state solution. People care about their home, and it's a devastating situation in Gaza right now. But I believe those individuals are expecting to rebuild and come back. We don't want terrorist organizations functioning in these capacities. We want people to live in peace. Everyone deserves that. My focus is going to be really on the issues here in New York 22 and the tremendous impact that some of these executive orders are going to bring. But I will also say finally on that issue of the statements that the president made about Gaza, those have been scaled back since. And I do believe that what he's proposing is probably very unlikely to occur. But I've supported a two-state solution. I'm going to continue to.
And just one more question about that. As you're saying you support a two-state solution, it's fair to say that this would not be a two-state solution if the United States was to take on what the president's suggesting.
It would not be. And after October 7th, which is a horrific day, and throughout the fighting, I always said that it is going to take leaders around the world, particularly the United States of America, to come in, broker an agreement, and help to rebuild and provide sustained peace. I hope that is still the case. I would say that if we're true to our values as a country, uh, taking over Gaza is not true to those values, and certainly not what we were hearing out of the current president leading into this, that we were going to take such an aggressive act towards that land.
What are you hearing from constituents about the overall start to the Trump presidency and what Congress's role needs to be and how you can assert, that those three equal branches of government, we're seeing so much of one branch right now. What's going to come next?
We're hearing chaos and confusion. The chaos and confusion is intentional, and it's intentional to drive part of an agenda that's related to Project 2025. My office has heard consistently from Democrats, Republicans, independents, that this is not what they voted for. They weren't voting for the pardoning of January 6th rioters who attacked law enforcement. They didn't expect a firing of all inspector generals, which is a violation of the law. It's very clear that the three branches of government in this country have worked, and the legislative branch has an important role. One good example is the funding freeze that the executive order and the memo tried to enact, and that is a violation of the Constitution clearly. In fact, we had a Republican House in the previous Congress that voted for those appropriations, and they should be distributed as such. I do believe that we should be taking actions to find government waste and fraud and do all of those things. But there is a process to do it. In fact, the president has a process when it comes to changing appropriations, but his range is very narrow and it requires congressional approval. So let's go through that process. It's very concerning for everyone because we are seeing a violation of the Constitution, a violation of the law, and the executive branch exercising powers that are beyond his powers. And certainly actions like the removal of individuals from the DOJ and the FBI, things related to the federal workforce, these are beyond the bounds of what an executive can do. That's clear. And what I'm going to keep working. There's certainly actions in the courts that are occurring. New legislation is coming out all the time. But I ask, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to represent the House of Representatives and make sure that these powers remain within our control, because right now that is being clearly violated, either unconstitutional acts or acts that are breaking federal law. So it's very concerning. I'm going to keep working, and we're going to do what we can legislatively, even within a House majority held by Republicans and in the Senate, to bring some light on this, make some changes, and get the powers back where they're supposed to be in the legislative branch.
Are you disappointed in House leadership? I mean, I know it's a different party, but still, it's the House leadership. There's the Speaker that is supposed to be a relatively powerful figure, yet he seems to simply be answering to whatever the president says.
In our history, we have had multiple moments where we've had one party holding the House, the Senate, and the White House. In fact, we just had it a few years ago under the first Trump administration. These kind of things did not happen. The legislature, even with a Republican House majority, asserted its authority and spoke up and did not allow actions to run rampant. What's happening with Elon Musk and his access to sensitive government databases is really probably at the highest of priorities for at least many of our constituents. There's lots of things that are very troubling here. This individual, who's the wealthiest man in the world and has multiple conflicts of interest, has, there's been no security clearance process. He has not been nominated and vetted and approved. And, these are the things that the legislature should and can act on regardless of who's in the majority.
Are you able to are you able to alleviate concerns of constituents who call with specific problems? In other words, funding's been cut off or they've been left up in the air. What has your office and your staff been able to do to help with that?
Well, the funding piece is very concerning. We went right into action, and I've got a great team that has been working 24/7 to make sure we know what the funding streams are out there. These grants that are dedicated to really essential services that are happening out there. We've communicated, with municipalities related to funding for law enforcement training. We've communicated with school districts for not-for-profits. We want to know, first of all, what grants are you receiving? Number two, when do you expect those reimbursements or whatever might be to come? Number three, are the portals open? And so, again, we're here to work. We're here to make sure that it flows. The impact of pausing that spending, which is beyond the powers of the executive, would impact every congressional district in this country. And it wouldn't just impact the people who are benefiting from the service, be it law enforcement, be it workforce development, whatever it might be. It's the people that work in those capacities as well. We've talked to multiple people who don't know if they're going to get a paycheck in a week or two if that freeze is in place, and they won't be in a position to help who need the service provided. And it's so far reaching. I think many of my constituents may not know the impact that a lack of funding would have on them. I think we would all find that out very quickly with the impact to municipalities and not-for-profit organizations.
Do you hear from Republicans quietly within the House who also are not happy with this? Or is it only the more vocal, visible group of the Republican Party that's very supportive of the president? But I assume there must be others who are not happy.
We had a bipartisan delegation meeting yesterday, and it was a productive conversation. I think everybody is really focused on that funding, and I do believe that it's bipartisan in nature. I think we all believe, number one, we should cut the funding. Number two, I do believe, even if it's unspoken, that everybody agrees that the executive is beyond the bounds of his powers, and that it would have a real negative impact on our communities that would be devastating. And even the pause would be devastating. But I did in that meeting also express my concerns about what seemed to be unchecked powers. And what we're seeing in these nominations are individuals that may not be qualified or have the character to sit in these cabinet positions and are more loyalists to the president rather than an independent check on all branches of government. So that is concerning, and I at least expressed that to my colleagues who I have very good relationships with on the other side of the aisle, particularly in the New York delegation. But I certainly want people to stand up. I think every elected, maybe I shouldn't say every, I think many or most members of the House of Representatives see this as a dramatic overreach. It's not just the implications of today, it's the implications a month from now, a year from now, and then for generations. If because presidents are only around for so long, and we change the powers of the executive office, we are no longer a three-branch democracy. We're using those words that were used leading up to this, which are oligarchy, autocracy, authoritarianism, and that is nothing. Those are words that should never be used in the United States of America.
I guess finally, along that lines, having said all that, do you still have faith that somehow the processes that are available between the courts and those in the House and the Senate can push back to keep this an equal balance of those three branches?
I do, because I have faith in the American people and I have faith in our American systems. And I do believe that everybody comes to, whether you're an elected official or not, a moment in time where you realize it may be time to act, or you may see something that you didn't see before. So I do have faith that that is going to happen. But I think you hear me. It's going to require bipartisan action by the House and by the Senate to make sure that the executive does not have an expansion of his powers. And right now, unconstitutionally and illegally, he absolutely has done that, and has not, other than the Democratic minority in the Senate, the Democratic minority in the House, and some allies that are out there. The only check has been victories in the courts around birthright citizenship and around calling this pause, an illegal action. And there was a temporary restraining order, and then that was rescinded. Continue to do those things and try to inform, my constituents in NY22 as best as I can with the limited amount of time that we have. Because again, there's chaos and confusion, which means people can't keep up with all of the changes. I believe that's intentional, and it's not a good way to govern.